Welcome to Monk's Temple. Let's begin with a simple experiment. Wherever you are, just pause. Notice the feeling of being here, the sense that you are present, behind your eyes, thinking, listening. It feels undeniable, the most basic fact of your life, the I, the me, the self that's been with you since memory began. What if this core sense of being a solid, continuous self isn't what you think? Not a lie, but a beautifully constructed illusion. A psychological process so seamless we mistake it for our deepest truth. And what if understanding this, not as philosophy but as direct insight, could loosen the grip of anxiety, dissatisfaction, and the exhausting effort to defend and improve you? This isn't mere theory. It is the heart of a discovery made over 2,500 years ago, one that forms the foundation of a profound psychological and spiritual path. Today, we begin a deep exploration. We'll move slowly, using stories, modern understanding, and gentle inquiry. This is not about belief, but about learning to look at your own experience in a new, freeing way. Let's start with a story about a king and a mirror. Imagine a king who lives in a palace of mirrors. Every wall, every ceiling, is a flawless, polished mirror. From the moment he awoke, the king saw his own reflection. He saw himself angry, joyful, pensive, powerful. He believed the reflections were showing him the world, an angry world, a joyful world. He never realized he was only ever seeing different angles of his own face, reacting to itself. He spent his life trying to manage the world in the mirrors. When a reflection seemed threatening, he'd posture and command. When it seemed pleasing, he'd cling and preen. His entire reality, his sense of self and other, was trapped in this hall of reflections. He was exhausted, living in a closed loop of reactivity, never knowing there was a sky outside the palace. One day, a crack appeared in one mirror. For a fleeting instant, through the crack, he saw not his own face, but a glimpse of open window, a leaf blowing in the wind. That glimpse shattered his reality. It was the first hint that the world he was managing was not outside him at all, it was a projection. The king himself was the source of all the images. This is our starting point. What you call you is not the stable king observing his kingdom. You are the entire hall of mirrors, the capacity to reflect, the images appearing, and the mistaken identity that arises from being lost in the display. The Buddha's teaching provides the map to see the cracks in the glass. It points to 5 fundamental processes that, working together, create the convincing illusion of a separate, permanent self. These are the 5 aggregates. Let's touch the first, most tangible one. The physical mirror itself. This is the aggregate of form, rupa. It's your body, your senses, the physical world you interact with. We treat the body as the ultimate proof of self. This is me. My face. My hands. But let's look with psychological and scientific insight. Consider your hand. Look at it. Is it the same hand you had as a child? At a cellular level, almost nothing remains. Your skin replaces itself monthly. Your bones are continuously remodeled. You are, physically, a process of constant renewal and decay. The body you had at breakfast is already gone. Modern biology confirms this flux. Yet, our entire culture screams the opposite. We fight aging. We obsess over appearance. We personalize every ache and change. I'm getting old. I don't like my shape. This is the king mistaking the mirror for the kingdom. We suffer because we cling to a temporary, changing physical form as our core identity. The Buddha's insight is liberating. Form is not self. It is a temporary, conditioned process. You can care for it, you should care for it, without confusing it with who you are. When a pain arises, experiment. Instead of, I am in pain, try noticing, there is a sensation of pain. This small shift begins to transfer you from being a prisoner of the body to being its compassionate, clear-sighted steward. But what brings drama to the reflections? Why do some images captivate us and others repel us? This leads to the most immediate driver of our behavior, the aggregate of feeling, Vedana. This isn't emotion. It's more primal. It is the bare, instant, nonverbal taste of every experience, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. The first sip of water when you're thirsty, pleasant. A sudden loud noise, unpleasant. The hum of a refrigerator, neutral. This happens before thought. It's the subconscious evaluative flicker that sets everything in motion. This feeling tone is the primary motivational engine of your life. Pleasant feeling triggers a pull, craving. Unpleasant feeling triggers a push, aversion. Neutral feeling often triggers ignorance, we tune out. We spend our lives on this puppet string of reaction, chasing pleasant feelings, fleeing unpleasant ones, ignoring the neutral. Modern technology is built on hacking this system. Social media feeds are engineered to deliver pleasant micro-hits, likes, notifications, and exploit aversion, fear of missing out. We are being steered by an ancient mechanism, often unconsciously. The path to freedom isn't to feel only pleasure. That's impossible. The freedom is in the space between the feeling and your compulsive reaction. The Buddha's wisdom points here. Imagine you're stung by a bee. The sharp, burning pain, that's the first arrow. It's automatic, physical. Then, the mind adds its story, why me? This is terrible. What if I'm allergic? My day is ruined. That storm of thought, the panic, the narrative, is the second arrow. And you are the one shooting it. Most of our suffering is this second arrow suffering, the mental anguish we add to the initial, bare sensation. The practice is to train yourself to feel the sting of the first arrow and to pause. To note, sharp sensation. Heat. Unpleasant feeling. Without immediately launching the story of, this is happening to me. This mindfulness of feeling is a profound tool for emotional resilience. It allows you to experience life's inevitable pains without layering them with mental torment. You begin to see feelings as impersonal weather patterns in the mind-body system, not as personal commands. The king begins to see that the captivating or frightening images in the mirrors are just reflections of light, conditioned by the glass. He doesn't need to command them, he needs to understand the nature of the mirror itself. If this perspective, seeing the body as a process and feelings as impersonal events, opens a little space in your understanding, consider subscribing to Monk's Temple. We explore these pathways together. This is just the beginning of deconstructing the palace of self. Now, let's return to our king in his hall of mirrors. We've seen that the physical mirror itself, the aggregate of form, is not the king. It's a temporary, changing surface. And the initial impact of light. The pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral spark we called feeling, is just an automatic signal, not a command from the throne. But the king's predicament deepens. A reflection appears. It's not just light, it's an image. He doesn't see shapeless brightness. He sees a frowning face. Instantly, a story unfolds, that is an enemy. A threat to my kingdom. This leap from raw sensation to named reality is the work of the third aggregate, perception, sana. Perception is the mind's labeling and interpreting function. It's what turns a blur of color and shape into my child, a pattern of sound waves into an insult, a bodily sensation into hunger or anxiety. It happens so fast we mistake its interpretation for objective truth. This is where the king's prison becomes fully furnished. The mirror doesn't just reflect, his own mind paints scenes on the glass, and then he reacts to his own paintings as if they were the external world. Here's a modern example. You're walking down the street and see an acquaintance. You smile and wave. They walk right past you, seemingly ignoring you. Raw visual data enters, form. A feeling tone arises, likely unpleasant, a sting of rejection, feeling. Then perception leaps in, weaving a story. They saw me and ignored me. They must not like me. What did I do? The entire mood of your next hour can be dictated by this instantaneous, and often completely inaccurate, interpretation. Perhaps they were lost in thought, or didn't have their glasses on. But your perception has already constructed a reality, a personal slight, and you live inside that construction. The Buddha's psychological insight is staggering. You have never experienced the world directly. Every single thing you've ever seen, heard, or thought has been filtered, labeled, and colored by this aggregate of perception. Your past experiences, your cultural conditioning, your fears and hopes, all form a lens. You see the world through this lens, but you think you're seeing the world plainly. This is why two people can witness the same event and have utterly different perceptions of what happened. They are not lying, they are literally experiencing different perceptual realities. Our digital age magnifies this. Algorithmic feeds are perception engines. They learn what labels and stories you engage with, your perceptual habits, and surround you with more of the same. Your political views, your tastes, your anxieties, all are reinforced in a closed loop. Your perceptual bubble feels more and like the whole sky. You become increasingly convinced your interpretation is the only truth, and anyone outside your bubble is foolish or malicious. This is the king, staring at one particularly dramatic painting in his hall, convinced it is the entire territory of his kingdom. The practice with perception is not to stop perceiving, that's impossible. It's to recognize perception as perception. To insert a moment of doubt between the label and your belief in it. When you feel a strong reactive emotion, ask, what is the perception here? What story am I telling myself about this? When you find yourself in a heated argument, pause and consider, is this a clash of truths, or a collision of perceptions? This awareness creates a liberating space. You can still see the frowning face in the mirror, but you know it's a reflection on glass, not a solid enemy advancing on the throne. Now, what happens once perception has set the stage? The play begins. This is the fourth aggregate, mental formations, sakra. This is a vast category encompassing all the active, volitional, shaping forces of the mind, thoughts, emotions, intentions, habits, desires, willpower, and tendencies. If perception is the scriptwriter naming the characters, mental formations are the director, the actors, the set designers, and the emotional score all in one. This is where personality and karma are built. Let's make this practical. You wake up feeling low, a feeling tone. You perceive this as, I'm having a bad day, perception. Then, the formations kick in, a habitual thought arises, nothing ever goes right for me. An emotion of self-pity follows. An intention forms to avoid work and scroll through your phone. A well-worn habit of procrastination activates. This entire cascade, the thought, the emotion, the impulse, is the play of mental formations. We take this cascade to be me. We say, I am a pessimist, or I am lazy. We identity with the formations. But the Buddha's framework invites us to see this differently. You are not the formation, you are the space in which formations arise. They are conditioned patterns, not your essence. Think of a groove worn in a dirt path by repeated walking. The groove is deep and directs your steps. You might say, this path always goes this way. But the groove isn't the path, it's a pattern on the path. With effort, you can walk a new route and begin to wear a new groove. This is the heart of actionable self-help within the Buddhist framework. You are not changing a fixed, flawed self. You are changing your mental habits. When the formation of anger arises, instead of being angry, I am an angry person, you can learn to observe, anger is present. See it as a temporary, conditioned weather pattern in the mind's sky. This observation, without judgment or identification, is like stopping yourself from walking down the old, deep groove. Each time you do this, the old formation weakens. Simultaneously, you can consciously cultivate new formations, wholesome grooves. When you practice deliberate kindness, you are wearing a new groove of the kindness formation. When you practice patience, you wear a groove of patience. This is karma in action, the intentional shaping of your mental formations. This aggregate is where your freedom is actively exercised. The king, seeing the painted enemy on the mirror, feels the old formation of fear and aggression arise. But now, with awareness, he can pause. He can see the fear as a formation, not as his royal command. He can choose not to send out the army based on a reflection. He can investigate, is this a true threat, or just paint on glass? This space between stimulus and response is where growth and choice live. We have now seen 4 aggregates that create the tapestry of experience: the physical base, form, the motivational spark, feeling, the interpretive story, perception, and the active habits and reactions, formations. They interact seamlessly, creating the vivid, compelling drama of my life. But something is still missing. Something that knows all of this is happening. We've traced the king's predicament through 4 interlocking chambers of his palace. The physical mirror of form, the initial spark of feeling, the painted stories of perception, and the reactive habits of mental formations. Together, they create a convincing world. But a central question remains: who is aware of all this? Who is the king, the knower, the observer of the grand illusion? This brings us to the 5th and most subtle aggregate, consciousness, via. This is the simple, cognizant quality of experience. It is the knowing of sight, the knowing of sound, the knowing of thought. It is the light by which the images in the hall of mirrors become visible. Surely, we think, this must be the true self. The body changes, feelings come and go, perceptions are biased, and habits shift. But the awareness behind it all, the silent witness, that must be the real me. This is the final and most cherished refuge of the separate self. The Buddha's examination, however, turns even this refuge inside out. He asked a simple, devastating question: is consciousness permanent and controllable? Can you command it? Can you decide, only pleasant thoughts shall arise in my awareness, and have it obey? Can you prevent an unwanted memory or a surge of anxiety from flooding into consciousness? The answer is no. Consciousness is utterly dependent. It arises only when its specific conditions are present. Let's break this down with a modern psychological lens. There is no single, unified thing called consciousness. Instead, there are discrete, momentary acts of knowing, each dependent on a sense faculty and an object. Eye consciousness arises dependent on a functioning eye, light, and a visual form. Ear consciousness arises with sound, an ear, and attention. When you close your eyes, visual consciousness ceases. In deep, dreamless sleep, where is your witnessing consciousness? It has faded, dependent on the brain's sleep state. Consciousness is not a stable spotlight shining from a central tower. It is more like a series of camera flashes in a dark landscape. Each flash illuminates a different scene. A sight, a sound, a thought, and then it's gone. The next flash illuminates something else. The illusion of a continuous, observing self arises from the rapid succession of these discrete, dependent flashes, much like a film creates the illusion of continuous motion from separate frames. This has a profound implication for the sense of being an observer. When you try to observe consciousness itself, what happens? You create a new moment of consciousness, a mind consciousness, whose object is the memory or concept of the previous conscious moment. It's like a flashlight trying to shine on itself. You only ever see where it was, not what it is in this instant. There is no stable observer behind the curtain, there is only the ever-fleeting act of observing, itself empty of any substantial observer. Let's illustrate this with an original story, The Lighthouse Keeper. Imagine a lighthouse keeper who has lived his entire life in the solitary tower. His sole duty is to tend the great lamp that sweeps across the dark sea, illuminating waves, rocks, and the occasional ship. He comes to believe that his essential identity is the one who sees. He believes the light originates from him, that he is the source of illumination, the permanent witness to the changing sea. One stormy night, the mechanism fails. The lamp goes dark. In the utter blackness, a moment of panic gives way to a shocking realization. Without the lamp, he cannot see anything. Not the sea, not the rocks, not even his own hands. His seeing was entirely dependent on the lamp. The lamp itself was dependent on fuel, on gears, on the generator. He was not the source of the light, he was the tender of a dependent process. The light was an event that occurred when all conditions aligned. His cherished identity as the seer dissolved. He was part of the interdependent system, the keeper, the lamp, the fuel, the dark sea. All co-arising to create the phenomenon of illumination. Your consciousness is that lighthouse beam. It is a dependent, intermittent event, not a permanent self. The feeling of being a watcher is itself a thought, a perception, a formation appearing within consciousness. It's the lighthouse keeper's idea of himself, appearing in the very light he mistakes as his own essence. Now we have all 5 aggregates. They do not exist in isolation. They lean on each other, mutually arising, like 5 swords propped together in mid-air. Remove one, and all collapse. Form provides the physical basis, the lighthouse. Contact with an object through form gives rise to a feeling tone, the impact of the dark sea. Perception labels it, stormy night. Mental formations react, the keeper's habit of worry, his intention to fix the lamp. And consciousness knows the entire event, the beam of awareness illuminating the broken gear, the feeling of panic. This interdependent process, moment after moment, creates the seamless, convincing movie of my life. The sense of a solid I is not any one aggregate, nor their sum. It is the mistaken identity that arises from their collaboration, the king believing he is the palace, the lighthouse keeper believing he is the light. Understanding this theoretically is one thing. Feeling its truth in your direct experience is another. This is where practice becomes essential. It's a gentle, persistent investigation. You don't need to go to a cave. You can start now. Next time you feel a strong emotion, pause. See if you can dissect the experience using this 5-part framework. 1. Form. What are the bodily sensations? Tight chest, heat in face. 2. Feeling. What is the bare tone? Unpleasant. 3. Perception. What is the story? He disrespected me. 4. Formations. What mental habits are active? Angry thoughts, urge to retaliate. 5. Consciousness. Simply note that knowing of all this is present. In this observation, you are not destroying the aggregates. You are seeing them clearly for what they are, empty, ownerless processes. The king steps back from the mirror and, for the first time, sees the framework of the palace itself. The lighthouse keeper looks at the lamp, the fuel, the gears. The illusion of a separate, suffering self begins to lose its power because you stop fueling it with mistaken identity. So now we have the map. We've seen the 5 interdependent processes. Form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, that together compose the brilliant, convincing illusion of a separate self. The king has seen the framework of his mirrored palace. The lighthouse keeper understands the lamp is a dependent mechanism. But a practical question remains: what does this mean for the way you actually live? If there's no solid me to find, how do you navigate the world of relationships, work, anxiety, and joy without falling into nihilism or confusion? This is where the Buddha's teaching blossoms from a psychological insight into a profound guide for living. It doesn't erase the conventional person who pays bills and has coffee with friends. Instead, it introduces a liberating fluidity, a way of engaging with life that is responsive instead of reactive, compassionate instead of defensive. Let's explore this through the lens of modern challenges, anxiety, identity, and conflict. First, consider anxiety. At its core, much of our anxiety is future-oriented fear for the self. What if I fail? What if they reject me? What if I get sick? It is the king, seeing a distorted, threatening reflection in one mirror and projecting it onto all future moments, believing the kingdom of me is under perpetual threat. Apply the aggregate framework. The anxiety is not you. It is a constellation of processes. There's a tightness in the chest, form. An unpleasant, gnawing feeling, tone, feeling. The perception of a threatening future story, my presentation will go badly, perception. A whirlwind of habitual worrying thoughts and impulses, mental formations. And the awareness of all this turmoil, consciousness. When you see it this way, you can address the components without being consumed by the phantom, I, at the center. You can bring a kind attention to the bodily tension, feeling its texture without resistance. You can note the unpleasant feeling without buying the catastrophic story. You can see the worrying thoughts as just thoughts, temporary formations passing through, not as truth. By deconstructing the experience, you drain the fuel of personal identification from it. The anxiety may not vanish instantly, but its power to define you diminishes. It becomes a passing storm in the mind's sky, not the permanent climate of yourself. Next, let's look at identity and our personal stories. We build narratives about who we are. I'm a success, I'm a failure, I'm a victim, I'm a helper. These are powerful mental formations, grooves worn deep by repetition and perception's labeling. We cling to these stories as anchors. But they are aggregates, not essence. I recall a man I once knew, let's call him David. For decades, his core story was, I am the one my family depends on, the unshakable rock. This formation shaped his every decision. When a sudden illness forced him to rely on others, his world shattered. He wasn't just facing a health crisis, he was facing the annihilation of David. His suffering was immense because he was clinging to a mental formation as if it were his soul. When he began to see this story as a formation, a helpful, conditioned pattern, but not his core, his healing transformed. He could appreciate the rock pattern for how it had served his loved ones, without believing he would cease to exist without it. He discovered other, subtler formations within himself: curiosity, gratitude, vulnerability. His identity became less of a statue and more of a river, able to flow around new obstacles. His story softened from a rigid definition to a fluid biography. This is the freedom of not self. You are not your resume, your trauma, your role, or your achievement. You are the spacious awareness in which these temporary patterns arise and play out. Finally, this framework radically transforms relationships and conflict. Most conflicts are clashes of perceptions and defended formations. You have your story, your perception and supporting formations, they have theirs. You both believe your story is the truth and fight to defend the self defined by that story. Seeing through the aggregates dissolves the battlefield. When someone speaks harshly to you, instead of instantly becoming the affronted self, how dare they speak to me that way, you can witness the process. The sound waves hit your ear, form. An unpleasant feeling arises, feeling. Your perception labels it an insult, perception. Your formations of anger or hurt activate mental formations. Seeing this, you might also intuit, their harsh words likely came from their suffering. Their own unpleasant feelings, their own distorted perceptions, their own reactive formations. They are trapped in their hall of mirrors, lashing out at reflections. This doesn't mean you accept abuse. It means you respond from clarity, not from a wounded, defended ego. You might set a boundary, but without the venom of personal hatred. You see the other as a being driven by temporary, conditioned processes, much like yourself, rather than as a solid, evil other. This is the ground of true compassion. It's not sentimental approval, it's the clear-sighted understanding that comes from seeing no permanent self in yourself or in anyone else. This brings us to the heart of the matter, living the middle way. This is the Buddha's path between the two extremes that trap us: eternalism, the belief in a permanent, solid self/soul, and nihilism, the belief that nothing matters at all. The teaching of the Five Aggregates avoids both traps. It denies a permanent self, countering eternalism, but it fully affirms the vivid, causal reality of experience, countering nihilism. Actions have consequences, karma. Kindness matters. Suffering and the end of suffering are real. You still make choices, love people, and work towards goals. The difference is that you do so without the crushing weight of believing you are a fixed entity called the chooser, the lover, or the achiever. You participate in the flow of life, like a skilled surfer riding a wave. The surfer isn't controlling the ocean, but through understanding its nature, they can move with grace, power, and joy. The king, having seen the framework of his palace, doesn't have to leave it. He can still live in it, admire the play of light on the mirrors, even use the reflections to navigate. But he is no longer a prisoner to the images. He is free within his own home. We've journeyed through the map. The 5 interdependent processes that create the sense of self. We've seen how this understanding can transform our relationship with anxiety, identity, and conflict. Now we arrive at the most vital part, the integration. How do we move from intellectual understanding to embodied knowing? How do we wear this new perspective like a familiar pair of glasses, through which we view every moment of our lives? This is the work of practice. Not practice as a chore, but as a gentle, persistent homecoming, a way of retraining attention to see what has always been true. The Buddha's path offers many gates. Today, let's walk through 3 practical, accessible ones: the practice of pause, the practice of inquiry, and the practice of releasing ownership. Let's begin with the practice of pause. This is the cultivation of mindfulness, but with the specific intention of seeing the aggregates in action. You don't need a meditation cushion to start. You can begin in the middle of a mundane moment. You're washing dishes. The water is hot, your hands are in the suds. Notice the physical sensations, the slickness of the plate, the temperature, the movement of your muscles. This is form. Now, notice the feeling tone. Is the warmth pleasant? Is the chore slightly unpleasant? Or is it neutral, just a background activity? This is feeling. Observe how perception instantly labels. This is a plate, I'm almost done, this is boring. These are the labels of perception. See what mental formations arise: an impulse to hurry, a wandering daydream, a slight irritation. These are formations. And throughout, be aware that you are aware of all this. That's consciousness. You're not trying to change anything. You're simply pausing the automatic movie to see the individual projectors and screens. Do this for just one breath, one action. This micro-pause, repeated throughout the day, begins to thin the illusion of a solid, continuous, you, doing things. Instead, there is just the doing, known. Now, let's deepen this with the practice of inquiry. This is a more focused contemplation, best done in quiet reflection. We'll use a story as our guide, the weaver's loom. Imagine an old, intricate loom. The frame of the loom is form, the physical structure. The raw fibers fed into it, wool, cotton, silk. Represent the raw data of the senses. The shuttle flying back and forth, creating the basic weave, is feeling, the constant undercurrent of pleasant, unpleasant, neutral tones. The pattern card that guides the design, the intricate picture emerging, is perception. It tells the story, creates the recognizable image, a rose, a landscape. The weaver's hands, their skill, their habits, their decisions to change colors or fix mistakes, this is mental formations, the act of shaping. And the light in the room, allowing the weaver to see the work, is consciousness. For a long time, the weaver believes, I am creating this tapestry. It is mine. It is me. Their mood rises and falls with the beauty or flaws in the cloth. Now, the practice of inquiry invites the weaver to step back and ask, is the loom me? If I dismantle the frame, am I gone? No, the weaving stopped, but the knowing of the dismantling remains. Are the raw fibers me? They come from outside, they are processed and change. Is the simple back and forth motion of the shuttle to me? It is automatic, conditioned by the mechanism. Is the pattern to me? It is a learned design, it can be changed. Are my weaving habits me? They can be unlearned and relearned. Is the light me? Without it, I cannot see, but the light is dependent on the lamp, the oil. Through this inquiry, the weaver sees that the tapestry, the seemingly solid, beautiful, flawed story of a self, is an emergent property of the loom, the fibers, the pattern, the skill, and the light. None of those components are a self. Their coming together creates the appearance of a tapestry. The weaver's liberation is seeing the tapestry as empty of a separate weaver. The hands still move, the loom still holds, the pattern unfolds, but the crushing weight of being its author and owner dissolves. You can apply this inquiry directly to your own experience. In a quiet moment, ask yourself, what is me right now? Is it the tension in the shoulders? That's form, a temporary condition. Is it the feeling of peace? That's feeling, it will change. Is it the thought, I am a good person? That's a perception and a formation. Is it the awareness itself? That's consciousness, flickering and dependent. Look for the one who is looking. You will find only more looking. This leads naturally to the third practice, releasing ownership. This is the gentle art of mentally uttering, not me, not mine. It's the weaver releasing claim on the tapestry. When a strong emotion like pride arises, instead of fully inhabiting it, I am so proud, you can silently note, this is pride. It has arisen. It is not me, it is not mine. It is a conditioned formation. You don't suppress it, you see its nature. When physical pain comes, this is pain. It is happening in the field of the body. It is not me, it is not mine. When a cherished opinion is challenged, this is a perception, defended by mental formations. It is not me, it is not mine. This practice isn't cold detachment. It is the highest form of intimacy with experience, free from the distortion of personal appropriation. It allows you to experience life fully, without being glued to it. You can feel profound grief without becoming the griefer. You can feel great joy without clinging to the joyful one. You live more lightly, with less baggage. Integration is a daily reorientation. You will forget. The old habit of selfing is strong. The king will get lost in a compelling reflection. The weaver will forget and grasp the tapestry. That's okay. Each time you remember to pause, to inquire, to release, you wear the groove of wisdom a little deeper. You are not building a new self called the enlightened one. You are simply ceasing to build the old one, moment by moment. And in that cessation, what remains is not nothing. It is the open, clear, compassionate space of awareness itself, the very nature of the mind, unobstructed by the tangled threads of a mistaken self. As we begin to live with this understanding of the five aggregates and not self, questions naturally arise. Some are practical hurdles, others touch the very heart of our human concerns. If there's no self, what about love? What is the point of anything? Doesn't this lead to passivity? And what about the profound, promised end of suffering? How does this empty framework actually lead to peace? Let's address these with the same blend of psychological insight and Buddhist wisdom. First, the question of love and compassion. If there is no permanent me and no permanent other, does love become meaningless? This is a profound misunderstanding. In fact, seeing through the illusion of separate selves is what makes unconditional love possible. Most of what we call love is entangled with ownership and need. I love you because you make me feel good, you complete me, you are mine. This is love rooted in the aggregates, in pleasant feelings, perceptions of the other as a source of happiness, and mental formations of attachment. It's fragile, because when the feelings change or perceptions are challenged, love can turn to fear or hatred. Compassion and love rooted in the understanding of not self are of a different order. When you see others as you see yourself, as a flowing, temporary constellation of causes and conditions, of aggregates in flux, your heart softens. You see their anger as their suffering, their cruelty as their pain, their kindness as their beauty. You are not relating to a fixed enemy or beloved, but to a process of life, just like your own. This allows for a love that is less possessive and more responsive, a love that wishes for the other's freedom from suffering simply because suffering is understood, not because it benefits you. It is the difference between the lighthouse keeper who owns the sea and one who tends the light for all who navigate it. Next, purpose and meaning. If I'm not a solid self achieving things, then why get out of bed? This question assumes that meaning can only be conferred by a permanent self onto its permanent achievements. But meaning and purpose are also experiences, they are perceptions and feelings that arise within the aggregates. The search for a grand, permanent, personal meaning is like one wave in the ocean searching for its own, unique, permanent purpose separate from the movement of the water. When the burden of being a separate self-project diminishes, purpose doesn't vanish. It becomes immanent and fluid. Purpose arises naturally in the flow of responsive, compassionate action. You care for your child not because it defines you as a parent, but because care arises. You do good work not to build a legacy for a future you, but because skillful, present engagement is its own fulfillment. Meaning is found not in the distant horizon, but in the texture of the present moment's engagement. Free from the anxiety of whether this moment is contributing to the monument of me. This addresses the fear of passivity. Won't I just become indifferent? On the contrary, action becomes more effective because it's cleared of the ego's clutter, defensiveness, pride, fear of failure, and craving for credit. You act because the situation calls for action, not because I need to be seen as an actor. A doctor in an emergency doesn't stop to think, how will this surgery affect my self-image? They are fully engaged, responding to conditions with skill. Their sense of a separate, performing self has momentarily vanished into the task. This is action without the actor, and it is often the most precise, compassionate, and powerful action possible. The path is about bringing that quality of selfless engagement into all aspects of life. Now, let's turn to the deepest promise, the end of suffering, dukkha. How does seeing the emptiness of the aggregates lead to peace? Suffering, in the Buddha's precise definition, is not just pain. It is the stress, the unsatisfactoriness, the anguish that arises from clinging to what is impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self as if it were permanent, satisfying, and self. The aggregates are impermanent, unsatisfactory when clung to, and not self. Suffering is the friction between the way things are, anicca, dukkha, anatta, and our desperate desire for them to be otherwise, for permanence, for solid satisfaction, for a secure self. It is the king trying to polish a reflection into a permanent statue. It is the weaver raging because the silk is fragile. When you see the aggregates clearly, see the body changing, see feelings arise and pass like bubbles, see perceptions as constructed labels, see formations as habitual grooves, see consciousness as dependent flickers. The craving to grasp them as me and mine weakens. You stop trying to get life to apologize for being temporary. You stop trying to nail the river to the riverbed. The suffering that required a sufferer begins to subside. What remains is the pure experience of life itself, vivid, poignant, sometimes painful, sometimes joyful, but not owned. A pain in the leg is just a sensation, not a personal affront. A loss is a deep change in the patterns of the world, not an annihilation of the self. This is the peace that is not dependent on conditions. It's the peace of the sky, which contains storms but is not destroyed by them. Let's close this part with a final, integrative story, the Night Gardener. There was a gardener who loved a single, magnificent white rose bush. He identified with it completely. My beauty, he would think. He watered it, pruned it, defended it from pests. His happiness was tied to its blooms, his anxiety to its wilting leaves. One night, a sudden frost came. In the morning, he found the blooms blackened, the stems limp. He was devastated. I am ruined, he wept. For weeks, he avoided the garden. But one evening, drawn outside, he sat by the dead bush. In the moonlight, he simply looked. He saw the brittle stems, the curled leaves. He felt the sadness, feeling. But without the thought, my loss, he just felt the sadness as a natural response. He noticed the perception, dead bush, arise. And then, his attention, freed from the story of me and my rose, wandered. He noticed the intricate frost patterns on the soil, form. He heard an owl, consciousness of sound. He felt the cool air, feeling. A thought arose, the soil is still good here, formation. In that moment, he wasn't the gardener who lost his rose. He was just part of the night garden, the feeling, the seeing, the hearing, the thinking. His personal devastation had dissolved into a larger, impersonal experience of life and death, stillness and sound. The next day, he cleared the old bush and, without urgency or personal hope, planted a new seed. The action arose from care, not from a need to rebuild his identity. He was free to tend, and free to let go. This is the taste of the freedom pointed to by the Five Aggregates. Not an escape from life, but a full, unburdened participation in it. We have journeyed from the first glimpse of the illusion, the king in his hall of mirrors, through the detailed map of the Five Aggregates, and into the practical heart of how this understanding transforms our living. We've addressed the deep questions of love, meaning, and the end of suffering. Now, we arrive at synthesis. How do we carry this forward? Not as a fragile intellectual concept, but as a living, breathing wisdom that grows roots in our daily experience. This final part is an invitation to a way of being. First, it's essential to recognize that this understanding unfolds in layers. You won't achieve a permanent state of selfless awareness and then be done. The aggregates will continue their dance. The mind will habitually reassemble the familiar shape of me. This is not failure, it is the nature of the path. The practice is one of recognizing rather than eradicating. Each time you catch yourself solidifying, clinging to a mood as identity, defending an opinion as self, or fearing a change as annihilation, that is the moment of practice. That is the crack in the mirror through which you see the sky. Each recognition is a stitch loosened in the tapestry of the illusion. So, let's talk about the path forward in terms of cultivation. Think of your mind as a garden. An analogy we've touched on, but let's deepen it. For years, you've tended one primary, towering plant, the plant of self. You've watered it with attention, fertilized it with your stories, pruned it to fit your ideal image, and defended its territory fiercely. The garden around it, the subtle sounds, the play of light, the other, smaller flowers of momentary experience, was neglected, seen only in relation to the central plant. The teaching of the Five Aggregates doesn't tell you to set the garden on fire. It invites you to shift your role from the owner of one prized plant to the tender of the entire ecosystem. You learn to appreciate the rich soil of form, feeling its textures and nutrients. You observe the ever-changing weather of feeling, sunshine, rain, wind, without demanding only sunny days. You notice how perception plants labels like colorful flags, and you see them as flags, not as the territory itself. You watch the growth patterns of mental formations, some weeds of greed and aversion, some flowers of kindness and curiosity, and you gently tend to them, weeding out what causes harm, cultivating what brings beauty. And you rest in the open space of the garden, the allowing awareness of consciousness, which is the sunlight in which everything grows. Your daily practice is this tender attending. When you meditate, you are not trying to stop the garden from growing. You are sitting in it, observing its life with friendly curiosity. When you are in conversation, you are listening to another person's garden, their weather, their flowers, their weeds, without needing to compare it to your own or claim any part of it. When you work, you are simply engaging in the activity of gardening itself, the doing, without a constant narrative about the gardener. This brings us to a crucial point, the role of community and teaching. This path can feel disorienting. The old foundations are shaking. It is immensely helpful to have guides and fellow travelers, not to give you answers, but to remind you of the questions, to point out when you are rebuilding the central plant with more fervent care. The teachings of the Buddha and the wisdom of those who have walked this path are like maps left by previous gardeners. They don't grow the flowers for you, but they show you where the light is best and how the seasons turn. Listening to these teachings, reflecting on them, discussing them, this is part of fertilizing the soil of your own understanding. Finally, let's speak directly about freedom. What is it that we are actually freeing? It is not a self. It is the heart-mind from the constriction of selfhood. Imagine a clear, flowing stream. The water is naturally fluid, responsive, cool, and alive. Then, imagine a complex system of dams, channels, and filters being built in the stream, all designed to create a special, separate reservoir called my water. The system requires constant maintenance. It stagnates. It fights the natural flow. Suffering is the strain of maintaining that separate reservoir. Seeing the aggregates as not self is the careful, gentle dismantling of those dams and channels. It is not destroying the water. It is allowing the water to resume its natural state of flow. The stream hasn't gone anywhere. It becomes itself again, clear, responsive, and unburdened. Your natural qualities of awareness, compassion, joy, and equanimity are not creations of a self, they are the inherent nature of the unobstructed mind stream. They emerge when the rigid structures of I, me, mine, are seen through. This is why the Buddha's discovery is so revolutionary, yet so gentle. It doesn't ask you to become someone else. It asks you to cease identifying with a false construct, so that what you truly are can shine forth unimpeded. The love you express will be purer. The work you do will be more focused. The peace you feel will be less fragile. Because it won't be yours to defend. It will simply be the natural expression of life, flowing through the temporary, open configuration of these five aggregates. As we end this exploration, I leave you with one final, quiet contemplation. It is not a story, but a direct pointing. Wherever you are right now, pause. Notice the space around you. The air, the light. Now, notice the feeling of being here. Ask, gently, what is it that knows this? Don't answer with a thought. Just look. Is the knowing in the body? The body is known. Is it in the feelings? Feelings are known. Is it in the thoughts? Thoughts are known. Is it somewhere behind the eyes? That, too, is a location, an image, a thought, known. So what is this knowing? Look for its edges, its center, its owner. You will find only more knowing, seamless and borderless. This knowing is not a thing you have. It is what you are, before the aggregates assemble into the shape of a person. And it has been here all along. It is the sky in the crack of the mirror. It is the ocean before the wave of self arises. Rest here, if only for a breath. This is your groundless ground. This is the beginning and the end of the path. Not a destination to reach, but a reality to recognize, again and again, until the recognition becomes your home. Thank you for walking this path with me at Monk's Temple. This exploration is an ongoing conversation. If what we've shared here resonates, I invite you to subscribe and continue the journey with our community. Share this with anyone who might be ready to look deeply into the nature of their own experience. But for now, simply rest. In the knowing. In the flowing. In the beautiful, empty, luminous dance of what is. No one here. Just this. And this is already free. Be well.